When it was set on fire by looking at heat data detected here by NASA's firms. It shows there were fires here on the 11th of October at the plant. We can also see damage to the plant from other satellite imagery too. Have a look at this. For example, this is the plant on the 7th of October before the ceasefire was agreed. Now you can see IDF military vehicles and the staging area and defensive sand berms too. And at the plant itself, more military equipment. And this is the 11th of October, after the fire and after the ceasefire was announced. And you can see smoke still rising and damage from scorch marks. And the military vehicles that I showed you earlier have left the area. Legal expert Professor Janina Dill told us that the destruction of infrastructure like this may be a war crime, adding it's unclear how the necessities of war might require destruction of a wastewater treatment plant, particularly as the IDF prepares to retreat. That's part of a wider withdrawal. So the ceasefire deal means Israeli troops agreed to withdraw from deep inside Gaza City. This red line here shows where Israeli troops agreed to retreat to. It means Israel still controls about 55% of Gaza. And we've been monitoring Israeli military presence using satellite imagery and video circulating on social media that we verified. These red points here show troops have withdrawn to positions along or beyond the withdrawal line. This is the view from one of those Israeli military positions in the Netzarim corridor south of Gaza City, which we've geolocated. And this is what Israeli soldiers have left behind. Destruction and damage as far as the eye can see. There's a wave of celebrations as hostages are released to Israel and Palestinian detainees are returned. But there's an immense challenge ahead for Gazans attempting to return to normal life in a landscape of physical devastation.
That's Merlin Thomas of BBC Verify. Now there is a news conference underway at the Sheba Hospital, which is in Israel, where the hostages have been taken. I think we can just listen in a little bit.
Welcome home. שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. אמן. תודה רבה.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Well, that was just the end of that press conference where they've been welcoming home, as you heard there, the hostages, the 20 live hostages. This is Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, where they have been celebrating through the night. And extraordinary scenes this morning as they saw their loved ones being released. And also in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, we have the summit getting underway very shortly, co-chaired by US President Donald Trump and Egypt's President el-Sisi. And there is President Trump ahead of that summit. We just saw his Air Force One landing and then the motorcade taking him to the summit, a summit of more than 20 world leaders. And very busy day for the US president because he flew into Israel and he addressed the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and congratulated the Israeli people on the release of the hostages. Let's listen in.
Like I think nobody's seen before. And we had tremendous stop, as you know, in Israel. And now we're in a country where a friend of mine is a very powerful leader. And my friend is right here, the president, also the general, you know. Sometimes I call him, usually I call him the general because he's both, and he's good at both. And they've done a fantastic job. And they have very little crime, you know. Because they don't play games, that's why. They don't play games like we do in the United States with governors that have no idea what they're doing. But they don't have crime. I ask about crime and they almost don't even know what I'm talking about. So it's a great tribute to this man. He's done a fantastic job in bringing this country together. And the United States is with him all the way. Thank you. Okay, all the way. And it's an honor to be with you.
Sir, what will Egypt's role play in the peace process here?
He played a very important role, and they had a very important role with Hamas. In fact, the general was right here, was very instrumental because Hamas respects this country and they respect the leadership of Egypt. So he played a very important role. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Thank you.
President Trump, in Israel just now, you were talking about a possible Iran peace deal. You said, we are ready when you are.
Yeah.
Is that the ultimate goal with today's signing, to get enough?
Not Iran, but I think Iran will come along. They've been battered and bruised, and you know they need some help. They have big sanctions, as you know, tremendous sanctions. I'd love to take the sanctions off when they're ready to talk, but they can't really survive with those sanctions. Those sanctions are very tough. But at some point, they're going to say, we want the sanctions off. We're going to end up with peace. I think Iran is going to be fine. I know so many Iranian people. They're great people. They're smart, great people. Engineers, lawyers. I mean, they're academics. But they took a big hit. And frankly, if we didn't hit them with the nuclear, I don't think you would have been able to have this incredible, this deal, this once-in-a-lifetime deal. Nobody's ever seen anything like what's happening today. And countries have all come together, all different countries. Some liked each other, some didn't, most didn't. And they've all come together. Every country has come together. And by the way, Iran did put out a statement, you know, that they support this deal very wholeheartedly. So that was in itself something. But no, I think they want to, that's all I do in my life. I make deals. And they want to make a deal.
Now that the living hostages have been returned, can you please tell us what the next steps are to phase two?
Well, they're going and looking for bodies. It's a pretty gruesome task. And they know where numerous are, as you know. I guess 5 or 6 are in yet now. But they're looking for bodies. They know the areas, and they search parties out, and they're doing it in conjunction with Israel. And they're going to be finding quite a few of them.
President Trump, can you tell us when phase 2 of the negotiations will begin?
Well, it started. I mean, it started as far as we're concerned. Phase 2 has started. And, you know, the phases are all a little bit mixed in with each other. They're going to start cleaning up. If you look at Gaza, it needs a lot of cleanup. That's why when I talked in my speech, I talked about the debris. I used the word debris. That's debris times 10. So, but they're gonna really do a job. They have a lot of power. In another room, you have the wealthiest, some of the wealthiest nations in the world. All leaders, the big leaders are here. The emirs and the kings and everybody, and it's a very interesting group. I guess we have like 35 countries, and that's only because they were the 35 that we invited. Everybody that we invited came. So there's a lot of respect. And I think you'll see some tremendous progress, both in the Middle East. This country is doing very well. It has good leadership. It's about leadership. And it's really nice when you say, how is your crime situation? And they don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean crime? We don't have crime. Because if he has crime, he puts it out very quickly. Some people think that's not nice, but I think it's great. Because people don't want to be mugged and smashed, and they don't want to be stupid people. They have a place that is doing very well. We're very proud of it, because we knew each other from the beginning. The first time I met, it was in a hotel, and I was going to meet him, and then Hillary Clinton was following me. Remember Hillary Clinton? And he liked me so much, he never even got to see Hillary. He saw her for about 2 seconds. But he didn't really want to waste a lot of time. He knew what was going to happen. But that was the first time we met, and we had a very good chemistry together. And it continues till today. So I want to thank you all very much. I appreciate the way you covered this really momentous, I've never seen anything like it. The level of love, the level of respect for what it is. And it's, you know, it's peace in the Middle East, and everybody said it's not possible to do. And it's going to happen. And it is happening as before your very eyes. And that's why it's become so fascinating. Marco, do you have anything to say?
Egypt's been a phenomenal participant. I think both Steve and Jared will tell you the critical role they played, and they can tell you themselves. They hosted the talks here, and they're going to play a very important role now in the follow-up, the implementation of this, which is really, it's not simply about restoring Gaza, it is about transforming the region. So we have an incredible partner, a long alliance, very capable partner here, and a tremendous collection of leaders. This is clearly, in my mind, I think in the mind of everyone in this room, probably one of the most important days for world peace in 50 years. And that's not an exaggeration.
Only 50?
Maybe 100. It's really since the end of World War II, Mr. President.
Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner, I'm curious, you played such an important role in the tactical negotiations here. What will your role be going forward as a lot more has to be brought to the table here?
Oh, the minute we had inked the deal, Jared and I were already working on the implementation side of the deal. So we're dug in. We'll be here quite a bit. That's at the direction of the president. That's probably going to be one of the most important phases here. Jared is remarkable to work with. I talk about it all the time, and of course we both love working for the president. So it's feels like a very honorable job.
Mr. President, would you like to say something with the interpreter?
Yes. اسمحوا لي في البداية أن أنا أرحب بفخامة الرئيس. وأنا سعيد وكل شرف موجودة في شرم الشيخ مدينة السلام. يسمح لي فخامة الرئيس أن أنا اسمي باسم كل المصريين ويمكن حتى لكل محب السلام أوجه لك التحية الأهلية والاحترام على تحقيق هذا الإنجاز الرائع والعظيم.
Well, first of all, Your Excellency, I welcome you to Egypt. It's a great pleasure and an honor to have you with us here in the city of peace, Sharm El-Sheikh. Allow me also to extend, on behalf of all Egyptians and peace lovers around the world, salute, the appreciation and respect for this unprecedented and momentous accomplishment by your hands.
أنا كنت متأكد فخامة الرئيس أنك الوحيد القادر على تحقيق هذا الإنجاز وإنهائه.
I've been very confident that Your Excellency is the only one who is capable of bringing this about and bringing an end to this war.
وأنا في خلال اتصالي بفخامة الرئيس ذكرت له ذلك بدقة. قلت لفخامة الرئيس أنت وحدك القادر على تحقيق السلام في منطقتنا.
I even said that very precisely during my communication with Your Excellency, that you are the only one who is able to bring about peace and to achieve peace in this part.
بشكرك فخامة الرئيس.
I thank you, Mr. President.
ولكن عايزين نستكمل نثبت إطلاق النار ونطلق السراح كل الرهائن وحتى يعني للأسف الجثث المتبقية في أسرع وقت عشان تسلم إلى ذويهم في إسرائيل ثم إدخال المساعدات ونستكمل باقي المراحل.
And what we need to do now is to fixate the ceasefire, make sure that it maintains and sustains, that we can deliver all of the bodies of the deceased to the families, and this is very important, to bring in more humanitarian assistance into the Strip, and working very closely on following up the rest of the steps that should be taken to make this successful.
Mr. President, you did very great. Thank you.
That's very nice. Thank you. He's a good man.
Thank you.
He's a good man. We're with him all the way.
Will he be on the board of peace, sir?
I'd like to have him on the board. I'd like to. We may need an interpreter, but that's okay.
As long as the President, His Excellency, presides the Board of Peace, I'll be there.
We've had many leaders want to be on the board, actually. The Board of Peace, it's taken on, Steve, I'd say a life of its own. Do you want to discuss that? What's happened?
I think we have a long list of applicants to be on that board.
Everybody wants to do it. That's very nice. That's better than the other way. Usually it's the other way. Nobody wants to be on the board. But it's really taken on, this whole thing has taken on a life that's very different. So it's been really a great honor. And you people have done a fantastic job, I want to tell you. We appreciate it very much.
Blessing.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Hold it 1 second.
أنا عايز دعم فخامة الرئيس ورعايته معانا في مؤتمر إعادة الأمن.
I just want and look forward to Your Excellency's support and your sponsorship with us in the conference for the reconstruction.
Thank you. 100%. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Brad. You guys, let's go. Thanks, guys. Let's head out. Violet done. Come on, guys.
Traveling with him on Air Force One, asking questions, wide-ranging. Everything from the comments by President Trump to the...
Okay, well, we're having trouble making a connection with our correspondent there, Lise Doucette, in Tel Aviv. But let me just recap what we're hearing there from Donald Trump and the Egyptian president as well. Donald Trump was asked actually by our State Department correspondent Tom Bateman whether phase 2 of the Gaza peace plan is now being talked about, and he said yes, talks are already underway on phase 2 of the peace plan, and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were there as well in the room and talking about how they are already working on the implementation of the Gaza peace plan, and saying that they are intent on transforming the region. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that this was one of the most important days for world peace in the last 50 years. Donald Trump said only 50, and Marco Rubio said maybe a century, certainly since the Second World War. Let's go back to Lise Doucette then in Israel. Lise.
Yes, the first time the journalists have thrown questions at President Trump ever since he left on Air Force One on his overnight flight here to the region. This was the first time he took questions at length, and as we've been reporting, and as you may have seen if you were watching that informal press conference alongside the Egyptian President Al-Sisi, both of them had their teams, their respective teams, lining the walls on both sides, the journalists throwing questions at him, everything from the Iran nuclear deal, President Trump saying that he would like to do a deal with Iran, heaping praise on the Iranian people, skilled people, people who he hopes want to do a deal, even saying that the leadership of Iran wants to do a deal and, of course, get away from the sanctions that the United States has imposed year after year on Iran. He was also asked about the anger here in Israel about why only 4 of the remains of the hostages have been handed over. We've had a statement from the Forum of the Hostages and the Missing Families Forum saying that they regard it as a violation of the terms of the ceasefire deal. President Trump was at pains to say that the search goes on to find the remains, and if only 4 were handed over today, that more would be handed over in the days to come. Again, we heard praise from President Sisi about the role played by President Trump and nudging him to continue to play a pivotal role in ensuring that this peace process does go forward, if we can call it a peace process. You heard there from Steve Witkoff, the envoy for President Trump, also Jared Kushner, who were asked directly when would they start those negotiations, and they said, well, no sooner did we reach an agreement on the first phase of the deal, then we moved to the implementation. Finally, President Trump talked about that board of peace that he is going to head. Everyone's asking who is going to be on that board, and we heard from Steve Witkoff that it would be a long list of people. Interestingly, a lot of attention has focused on the fact that the former British Prime Minister's name, Tony Blair, has been circulated. He's worked very closely with the US team on the 20-point plan. But when he was asked about it, before he flew to this region, President Trump says, well, I want to hear whether everyone wants to have him, reflecting with some of the criticism from the Palestinians that this smacks of, in their view, neocolonialism. Why do they need this international board that the Palestinians, along with Arab states, could run their own affairs? So we're seeing now that hall where all the flags of more than 20 leaders gathered there, who waited hours for the president to arrive. Let's stay in Sharm el-Sheikh. My colleague, our Middle East correspondent Hugo Bechega, was also there waiting for the president to arrive. Well, finally, the trip has got off to a start. What do you think will be the first on the agenda there, Hugo? President Trump has left the side of President Sisi, and now we saw them go out of that room. We assume he is now meeting those leaders who waited so long to speak with him.
Yeah, they're running very late here in Sharm el-Sheikh, Lise, and I think the tone of what is going to happen next is very much the tone that we've just heard from President Trump alongside the Egyptian President Sisi. The president being very optimistic that the ceasefire is going to hold. I thought it was very interesting that he said negotiations over the second phase of his 20-point plan are already underway. He also said he was optimistic that this deal could be expanded. He talked about the possibility of Iran even joining these deals, saying that Iran wants to make a deal. Again, he talked about the role that Egypt played in these negotiations. Egypt has been a key mediator in these talks for a deal in Gaza, and we saw that key players in these negotiations, not only President Trump, President Sisi, but also the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the President's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Again, the President said we are working to implement the Gaza deal, again expressing confidence that the ceasefire is going to hold. And I think, you know, for the meeting that is going to happen here in Sharm el-Sheikh, this is going to be another victory lap for the President. He wants to be seen as the leader who made this, who reached this deal, who was behind these negotiations, and it is also very symbolic in terms of the international support that this deal is receiving. We have leaders from the UK, France, Germany, Italy, but also key regional leaders, which shows the level of support here in the Middle East for the President's plan. But again, it is very difficult to see how any kind of major progress can be achieved in terms of the next phase of the plan for Gaza without the presence of representatives from Israel or Hamas. And we've been talking about those key sticking points, those major obstacles in these negotiations, about the future of Hamas, about the scale of the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and obviously about the future of Gaza. Who is going to govern the territory? Who is going to help rebuild a Gaza that is almost completely destroyed? So key points, key sticking points remain, but the President now saying that negotiations over the next phase of the deal are already underway.
And we're looking, Hugo, at the hall with the banner, Peace in the Middle East. That's how President Trump wants to describe it. All of the flags lined up. We've heard various accounts of a signing ceremony, whether that will be signed by the guarantors of this process, the mediators. What is your understanding of the actual official ceremony once it gets underway?
Yeah, so I think we know very little of the details of what is going to happen today. The Egyptians said that there will be a ceremony, the official signing of the deal, and also discussions to finalize the deal over Gaza. So very significant that all these key countries are here, gathered. The US, not only the US, but also Qatar, obviously the Egyptians, and also Turkey that played a key role in those final negotiations that happened here in Sharm el-Sheikh last week. Very interesting, Lise, that in one of the main squares here in Sharm el-Sheikh, there is a huge billboard with the pictures of President Trump and also President Sisi, and a message saying, "Welcome to the land of peace." So this is very much how the President is trying to sell this deal in Gaza, saying that this is the beginning of peace in the Middle East. He's been talking about his desire, his wish, his plan to expand the Abraham Accords to try to normalize relations between Israel and other countries in the region. Obviously, this was a significant diplomatic achievement in his first term in office, and now the President saying that what we're seeing here today is the beginning of a plan to bring peace not only for Gaza but also for the entire region.
Hugo Bashega, thank you very much for joining us and reminding us of the Abraham Accords, or as President Trump kept saying today, the Abraham Accords, very much preferring the accent and the pronunciation of leaders in this region. We were showing you pictures of that hall. We know there will be a signing ceremony. The President Trump's late arrival, of course, has delayed all of the proceedings. There you have, we saw a little bit of movement there with something being moved to the podium. But we believe now that President Trump is finally meeting face-to-face the leaders who were waiting for him. They'll have some face-to-face discussions without the cameras there. Really important issues, and no doubt that all of the leaders that have been waiting for him, Arab, Western, Turkish leaders, they have important messages. They want to make sure he stays engaged in this process. He wants to make sure that they also stay engaged, and more importantly, that they also put money. He's talked a few times on this visit already about that some of the wealthiest, most powerful countries in the world, referring, of course, to the Arab Gulf states, they have the kind of power and wealth to begin the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip. We're going to continue to keep an eye on what's happening in Sharm el-Sheikh, but joining us now as a part of our special coverage is the former Prime Minister and Chief of Staff of Israel, Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak, welcome to BBC News.
Thank you for having me.
No doubt you, like all Israelis, like so many around the world, had your eyes on the speeches today, the emotional scenes of the reunions of the hostages finally returning home. Of course, Palestinian prisoners and detainees were also reunited with their families. You, of course, have been here yourself before as an Israeli Prime Minister. You stood alongside US President at the time, Bill Clinton, trying to make peace. What do you think is different this time round that perhaps gives hope it could be different this time?
First of all, you cannot compare it. It was a generation ago. It's like asking in I don't know, 2050, someone about Sharm el-Sheikh these days. He will usually hardly remember it. But it's a kind of an effort that was stopped somewhere some 15 years ago, and is now has certain opportunity of being renewed to relaxate the whole thing. The real difference is that now we have a extremely determined American president that aggressively pushed others into it. He was very capable in bending Netanyahu to whatever he decides to dictate, but also was very successful bringing Turkey especially. So the Hamas cannot have a lot of room for maneuver when they are encircled by the Qataris from one side, from the Turks by the other, and the Egyptians in the picture. So there is certain hope here. This day was the best in the last years for Israelis because of the release of the hostages. But the question of the next step is a little bit fragile. There is a need to keep, it all depends upon the determination of Trump and his attention. If we will keep pressing, the next step will come. There is a need to find the dead bodies. It will take some time, but we know a little bit about where they have to look for them, and there is a need for intervention of some neutral players, not just the Hamas. There is a need to enter with an inter-Arab/Muslim force very urgently. It cannot take months, at most few weeks. If within few weeks international Muslim Arab force will not enter and take over from Hamas, it will be very, very complicated to continue the next steps, because only this force can enable the building of the technocrats government, bringing back to work the tens of thousands who are part of the Palestinian bureaucracy, and later on, and of course disarm Hamas. I don't expect them to find the last Kalashnikov or light arm, because in the region, in every place, you have many light arms. But basically, the control of the streets and what happens should be conveyed from Hamas to this international force, which will have to build a new Palestinian security force. And Israel should have only two conditions. Number one, not a single member of the military wing of Hamas or someone who participated in the massacre on October 7th. Not a single individual can be a part of any organ of the new entity. And number two, that Israel will withdraw it first to the perimeter, but will not go out of the perimeter to the border before all the pre-agreed security milestones have been met. And the idea to bring Tony Blair, that I happened to hear you mentioning him, is very good. I don't think that the Palestinians can have any veto. It's all depend upon the Egyptians, Emiratis, and probably the Qataris and Turks. He's very good choice because he has a lot of experience with the leaders. He kept contact with individuals, with players in the region. I think they basically enjoy the respect of all. He led the quartet after the previous round of half a generation ago. And I think that it's a very, very good choice. No way that Trump will have enough time out of his many other jobs to lead such an operation. And it's good to have there the presence of someone who represents the international community.
Well, we're going to wait and see who's going to be on that so-called board of peace and who will oversee this really significant but also very delicate transition, which is fraught with opportunity but also risk. What is your sense, Ehud Barak, of this moment? We've heard President Trump a few times on this visit, and he said it directly to Prime Minister Netanyahu in the Knesset that the war is over. And yet last night, Prime Minister Netanyahu, as he hailed this moment, he also talked about the threats still facing Israel, the challenges Israel still faces. And many ask whether there is a risk that he will try to return to the war. Is there a risk?
There are always. The Middle East is nothing like the Midwest or Scandinavia. There are always risks. It's a tough neighborhood. No mercy for the weak. No second opportunity for those who cannot defend themselves. But Israel is still the strongest power in the whole region, and we should be self-confident enough. I believe that the war is over. It's enough that Trump dictates to Bibi to stop it. A few months ago, he dictated Bibi to turn a group of Israeli jets already over Iran to make a U-turn and go back to Israel. Trump can bend Netanyahu like a rubber doll. Netanyahu is not the problem. And most Israel doesn't want a new war. Most of us believe that the last stage of this war, the one that started in March, I believe, or a little bit later, the several recent months were a war of deception. It was not a real war. It had nothing to do with the security interest or any other interest of Israel. It was just about the survival of Netanyahu in power, because ending the war creates an immediate threat to his coalition. The Hamas was defeated militarily already some year or more ago. What remained is only small groups of guerrilla with light arms that trying to kill Israelis. There is no way to take over it kind of an absolute victory. Americans learned it in Vietnam. You and the Russians and the Americans learned it in Afghanistan. The Americans learned it in Iraq. We learned it in the West Bank. In the West Bank until now, after 58 years, there are still Hamas with light arms. And from time to time, they try to kill some Israelis. That has nothing to do with the strategy. So war is over, but whether it will not deteriorate once again, dependent on the effectiveness, efficiency, and swift implementation of the next stage, namely mainly bringing the inter-Arab or Muslim force, disarming Hamas from offensive weapons, and activate the reconstruction to be financed by the Emiratis, Saudis mainly.
Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, former Army Chief General, thank you very much for joining us with your reflections on the way forward. Ehud Barak emphasizing there too, the war is over, and we are seeing that banner in Sharm el-Sheikh. the ceremony that the United States is describing as a ceremony of peace. Peace in the Middle East is the mantra there. President Trump often talks about peace through strength. What kind of peace is on the horizon? Let's bring in Dan Shapiro now, a former U.S. ambassador to Israel who served under President Obama. Welcome to BBC News.
Thank you.
Dan Shapiro, we just spoke to Ehud Barak, who, of course, tried to make peace during President Clinton's time. You were here in Israel during President Obama's time. One U.S. president after another dared to hope that they would be the one to clinch that most elusive of prizes, peace in the Middle East. President Trump says it is peace in the Middle East. At least it is a slogan now. Do you actually allow yourself to think that this time it could be different?
Well, it's always good to have high aspirations, and it's always good to shoot for them. We're not there yet, and the president has a way of trying to upsell his accomplishments or his goals even before he's gotten there. That's not to take away at all from the importance of today's accomplishment. This is a critical breakthrough. He deserves credit with his team for the change they made after Israel conducted strikes against Hamas in Doha. And after several months of really accommodating additional military operations, he came to Prime Minister Netanyahu with all the leverage he had to say, this needs to end now, and you need to accept terms that are less than the total victory you demanded. He also then worked with the Gulf states, particularly Qatar and with Turkey, to put the pressure on Hamas to do the same, to accept terms that they had previously not accepted, so that we could get to this ceasefire and get to these hostage releases. So this is very, very important. It's brought this terrible war to an end, brings relief to Israelis and Palestinians. But that goal that he's pursuing now, peace in the Middle East, well, today's summit in Egypt is the start of that, but the first step is to complete the process of disarming Hamas so that they are not in power and not the spoiler that would prevent all the positive things happen: reconstruction, an international stabilization force, Israeli-Palestinian discussions on a future that will also provide fuel to that broader regional peace that he envisions and which I support. So long way to go, lots of work, lots of details, and that's a good aspiration to have, but we're definitely not there yet.
Yes, as you know, even in his first term in office, he upended decades of U.S. foreign policy towards this region, the kind of policies that you would have been part of when you were serving during the Obama administration, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Israeli control over the Golan Heights, saying that Israeli settlement building was not illegal under international law, and then pushing an Israeli prime minister in a way, it's being widely said, in a way that's not done before. And yet, when we look at the details of what still has to be done, most of all, that political horizon, that's the vague phrase in President Trump's 20-point plan. For the Palestinians, for Arab states, it's still about a two-state solution and a Palestinian state. Do you sense that President Trump will be on board with that trajectory?
Well, I don't think we really know. Of course, in 2020, he proposed a plan which could have been read in some ways as a version of a two-state solution. But of course, it was produced without any dialogue with the Palestinians. It didn't go anywhere, but it did in some ways help open the doors for the Abraham Accords, in part because the UAE stepped in to say they would oppose Israeli annexation of the West Bank, a step that might have been envisioned in his plan, but would instead move forward with normalization. Now, this time in his 20-point plan, he does say that he wants, as the Palestinian Authority reforms, as Gaza is reconstructed, to develop, as you said, discussions on a credible pathway to a possible Palestinian state, which he concedes is their aspiration. But of course, the current Israeli government opposes a two-state solution, and really the vast majority of the Israeli public, still very traumatized by the October 7th attacks, is not ready to have that conversation. Even people who have long supported two states before October 7th say, right now, until they see that Palestinian society has reformed, Palestinian leadership has reformed, Hamas is fully removed from power, and that risk of a repeat of that terrible day could not happen, they're not really able to have that conversation. So it's a long-term goal. It will take a long time. It will look different from previous efforts. But you're correct that most other countries in the region and many around the world still hold that down as one of the markers of that broader peace they want to see. The Saudis, for example, have said for them to normalize their relations with Israel, they need to see a credible pathway to a Palestinian state. So it's part of it. And I don't think we know for sure exactly how President Trump is postured on that.
Dan Shapiro, former U.S. ambassador to Israel during President Barack Obama's administration. Thank you for joining us with your reflections based on your long years of engagement with this region. And while we've been on air, there's been a statement from the Israeli Defense Forces. We've been reporting about the anger among the hostages' families that so few of the bodies of the Israeli hostages who did not survive their ordeal have not been returned. The IDF has issued the statement, and I'll read it. According to information from the International Committee of the Red Cross, 2 coffins containing the bodies of fallen hostages have been handed over and are on their way to the IDF and Shin Bet forces inside the Gaza Strip. The transfer of 2 additional coffins of fallen hostages will follow. President Trump also addressed that in his impromptu press conference once he arrived in Sharm el-Sheikh, said that efforts will continue to find the remains of the remainder, 28 in all, and only a small number have returned home to Israel today. Those are images now from Sharm el-Sheikh as they prepare that signing ceremony. And there's images on the other side, the Israeli flags in Hostages Square, peace upon Israel. Scenes of jubilation today as the big screens in the square broadcast the emotional images of the hostages returning. Let's bring in Leslie Vinjamuri again, President and CEO of the Chicago Council of Global Affairs. Of course, she is in Chicago. Leslie, finally, President Trump has now landed in Sharm el-Sheikh, and now he's paying tribute to the Arab leaders he's worked with. It's interesting how that when he was in Israel, he talked about how important his relationship, personal and political relations with Israel, with Israeli leaders, and now he's sending the same message to Arab leaders, and they want to believe that he's going to listen to all sides now. And I think that is what's made the difference in finally pushing a ceasefire deal across the line.
Absolutely. And I think President Trump not only says it, I think he firmly believes it. I think he feels that commitment to a number of parties on both sides of this conflict. Remember that this is a president who has ambitions not only for solving and delivering peace between Israel and Hamas and solving the problem of Gaza, but also across the region, both because he wants that peace, but also because he's long had aspirations for America's investment in the Gulf, for exchanges economically in terms of investments. He'd like to get to that peace, and he'd like to get back, I believe, to those broader ambitions. Some people feel that despite a long-standing, obviously, commitment between the United States and Israel, that President Trump has deep commitment and even affection for some of the Gulf leaders. So I think that when he says it, he believes it. And of course, the concern now is whether he will follow through, though, with the pressure that's going to be necessary in order to keep Israel in and to deliver, to keep leaders in the region putting pressure on Hamas so that disarmament is achieved. But now, in many ways, it's 2 things. One, will President Trump stay focused? And 2, there's a real sequencing question. What is the sequence for Israeli withdrawal, for Hamas disarmament, for international stabilization efforts? These are very big questions.
Leslie Vinjamuri, do stay with us for a moment, because we're going to the Ichilov Medical Center, a press conference briefing us on the state of the hostages. Let's listen in.
Ichilov Hospital and the entire Israeli healthcare system are an inseparable part of our national resilience and we will continue to stand beside the returnees, their families, and the people of Israel. Thank you.
Let's wait and see whether he'll take some questions. This is one, the Sheba Medical Center, who was briefing. Unfortunately, we joined that a bit late. That was giving us an update on the state of the hostages. There were 5 medical centers, 3 in Tel Aviv or close to Tel Aviv, 2 in southern Israel, including hospitals with specialized services in case the hostages, former hostages we say now, returned with quite severe injuries or conditions that needed specialized medical attention. We'll keep an eye on that because we're expecting more medical updates as the hostages continue to be treated now. There's President Trump, as you can see on that stage, Steve Witkoff, his envoy, shaking his hand. President Trump thanked him at length today during his speech to the Israeli. Oh no, that's King Abdullah of Jordan. King Abdullah of Jordan standing with him. Jordan's relationship also with the United States, rock solid. And King Abdullah of Jordan has made many visits to the United States, including since President Trump returned to the White House. Jordan, he once said that how Jordan is stuck between Iraq, his neighbor Iraq, and a hard place. There he is getting his photo opportunity. Peace 2025. Everyone wants their photo with the president. There he is with his favorite red tie. It's had a very long day after an overnight flight, beaming. The praise has been heaped upon him. Now he's greeting. We can see when he's. Leslie Vinjamuri is still with us as we watch these live pictures from Sharm el-Sheikh. These photo opportunities of the President of the United States with Arab leaders. It's interesting, Leslie, how they all want to be seen. Their public back home, to see them shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. President, with the U.S. leader and commander-in-chief who has done so much to push this deal over the line.
It is extraordinary, and for a president to, for many people, is a lightning rod to a division. In many respects, this is an entirely opposite image of this president delivering what he's long wanted to deliver, which is peace. Certainly that first step, the hostages coming home, but to see a number of leaders wishing to gather around him, it is an extraordinary image. Nobody wants to downplay the significance of today. There's great aspiration and hope, trepidation for what comes next. But for President Trump, I think just these images alone, these photos, this very short trip in the scheme of things, a day on the ground, is really meaningful and important to him. We have to hope that it's meaningful enough that he stays the course, stays in the game of what will be a very difficult phase 2 to deliver, but it is one that he's had an aspiration for. He's not succeeded in the other war that's been the primary focus of his administration in delivering that peace between Russia and Ukraine. I think the fact that there has been success so far is very important for him.
And look at this. We talked about in President Trump's first term his bromance with the French President Emmanuel Macron. He, I think more than any other European leader, did his best in President Trump's first term, inviting him to Versailles, giving him a very, very lavish welcome. And again, in President Trump's second term, President Macron has done everything he could. It's said that his own plans for the future of the Gaza Strip have also played a big role in President Trump's 20-point plan, and of course emphasizing that we're not just Arab and Western leaders from across the world, many regions of the world are now meeting President Trump. Everyone wants to be, not just be here, but be seen to be here. It's quite an extraordinary moment, Leslie, that they all want to have their photo opportunity. Another leader from the Gulf, I think that's from Qatar, yes, the Qatar, the Emir of Qatar there playing. President Trump has singled out Qatar to tell them just how much, and they have played an absolutely crucial role. Look at doing the thumbs up, big smiles, thumbs up. Leslie, the Qataris have their relationship with President Trump is financial, personal, political. When President Trump came to the region visiting Gulf states, the extent of that relationship was on show, and Qatar has delivered in so many ways for President Trump.
And absolutely, but President Trump has also made it clear that, you know, that America is a friend, a partner, even an ally of Qatar. Those photo images, remember, also, you know, this is public diplomacy at work. The leaders across the Middle East, across Europe, and here in the United States know that the people have been watching this war. It has been a very divisive war for many publics. They have had to pull the public along with the hope and the promise that there would be peace for Palestinians in Gaza in particular. And so I think those photo ops are really a phenomenally important way of signaling to those leaders, publics, that they are part of what will be a transformation. That's the aspiration. We all know how tall and how difficult that aspiration will be to deliver in the medium term. But those images are critical to show back home to all the people who are watching this historic day.
Yes, we just saw Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Turkish president, who came up with his wife. They had quite a long conversation. President Turkey, of course, playing an absolutely critical role. The Turkish intelligence chief, Kalin, had actually gone to Sharm el-Sheikh as well, using his contacts with Hamas of long standing to also exert pressure to get that deal over the line. Let's see, as we continue to watch these pictures now coming from there's Viktor Orban, the President Trump's strongest ally in Europe, staunch supporter of President Trump, the Hungarian leader. Leslie Vinjamuri, President and CEO of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. We'll let you go for now, but thank you very, very much for taking time out of your day to be part of our special coverage of President Trump's visit to the region, now in Sharm el-Sheikh, meeting one after another all of the leaders who were waiting for him and now getting their moment for the handshake, for the thumbs up. Let's bring in a different side of this story today. It's one that President Trump continues to mention, and that is the future of the U.S. relationship with Iran. We do know that the Iranian President Pezeshkian was invited to Sharm el-Sheikh. He declined. The invitation was then extended to the Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi. He too declined, saying that he couldn't, without mentioning the United States, saying they couldn't be in the same place as countries which attacked Iran, which imposed sanctions. I'm going to bring in now Trita Parsi. He's the Executive Vice President at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Trita Parsi, as we watch one leader after another, Spanish leader now, Sanchez now with President Trump. Your comments on what President Trump has said again today. He praised the Iranian people. He said that Iran did want a deal. Which, of course, talked about how they did the attacks against Fordow, the nuclear sites in Iran had been successful. How do you read what President Trump has been saying today? Now the Norwegian leader, Støre, is now meeting him, Norway also playing a big role. Trita Parsi, your comments on what President Trump has said about Iran.
Thank you, Liz. I think we should remember that last time Trump talked so positively and said that he would like to get a deal, that he had nothing against Iran, wants to see Iran successful, it ended up with him and Israel bombing Iran. So this is part of the reason why the Iranians are so skeptical about this. Nevertheless, I personally think it's a mistake for them not to show up. At this point, I don't see what it is that they would be losing. I think a critical element that was missing, that I think could have been decisive, and it could have changed the story in which the deal actually could have happened instead of the U.S. greenlighting an Israeli attack on Iran, is the absence of a direct negotiation, not just between the U.S. and Iran, but between Trump and his equivalent on the Iranian side. This is a person who does things in a very personal way. Everything is personalized, and the most important person in the world, of course, is him. So for the Iranians to have rejected direct talks, for having not even considered in a serious way a direct conversation with Trump, I think was a mistake. Now, they may be committing yet another mistake, but we have to also understand that after having attacked Iran, the Iranians are not going to be more inclined to agree to negotiations, unfortunately. It's just basic human psychology.
Yes, and the optics back home in Iran, the hardliners in Iran who have been telling those who would like a better relationship with the United States, saying they were naive to believe that the United States was serious about negotiations after the war started, right in the middle, as you know, of talks, indirect, but some direct talks too, between Iran and the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. So was it also with a look at domestic politics in Iran as well that refusal to be in Sharm el-Sheikh was expressed?
I would say it's almost exclusively that, because at the end of the day, the standing of those who have argued in favor of diplomacy is in shatters inside of Iran's political debate right now, because of the fact that in the midst of the negotiations, the Israelis attacked, Trump took credit for it, and then he also attacked. So there is this narrative that diplomacy was nothing but a guise to lull the Iranians into a false sense of security and then bomb them. Now, that nevertheless doesn't mean that Iran's options are such that it actually makes sense not to even just show up at this meeting. At a minimum, if we take a look at it in of 30, 40 years, this is the first time the U.S. actually is insisting on the Iranians attending a regional event like this. Back in 1991, for instance, when the U.S. led the Madrid conference, they made sure that the Iranians were excluded, and the Iranians at the time wanted to be included, and the fact that they were excluded drove the Iranians in a much more radical position. Now the U.S. is the one that is insisting that the Iranians should be there. And the Iranians are backing out because they fear that diplomacy is just a trap in order for them to get bombed again.
Trita Parsi from the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft will leave it there, but who knows that in the weeks to come, President Trump, who very much wants to see himself, how he describes himself as a peacemaker, he too would like to do that elusive deal with Iran. There's Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, also who is in Egypt. The very good relationship between these two men. President Trump, of course, just recently completed a second state visit, invited by King Charles. Very successful visit, a deepening of the relationship between the United States and Britain, always called a special relationship. And Sir Keir Starmer seems to have found a way to keep that relationship going. And there's Mark Carney, who's just been in Washington to see President Trump, trying to negotiate over the reducing, if not eliminating, the tariffs that President Trump has imposed on the Canadian economy, causing such hardship, worries in Canada about the economic future. And Mark Carney was also complimented by President Trump, saying that he's a smart man, a very good negotiator. But Mark Carney has a very, very difficult job in trying to balance this relationship, such a two economies so deeply entangled. Well, while we watch these images of President Trump one after another greeting, there it is, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he's also there. All the top European leaders, Giorgia Meloni of Italy, who also has a very close personal relationship, was one of the few European leaders who was invited to the inauguration in Washington in January of this year. She was also there, warmly greeted by President Trump. This relationship also crucial. Friedrich Merz, Germany's stance on this war, always closely followed. Friedrich Merz has spoken out against the war, suspended some of the arms exports to Israel, but repeatedly called for an end to the war. Caused a lot of anger in Iran when the attacks against Iran started. He said that that the United States and Israel were doing, in his words, the rest of the world's dirty work. So many, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, that is a relationship that has been very, very strained. There's been very few meetings, although I'm told that despite the criticism that President Trump heaps upon the United Nations, that their meeting behind the scenes in New York went quite well. Huge pressure on Antonio Guterres. President Trump, of course, has pulled out the funding and political and moral support for a number of UN aid agencies. They're now struggling, cutting costs, cutting staff, moving some to Nairobi, the Kenyan capital, unable to cope with the very high prices in the United States. They're the head of the Arab League now, who will soon exit the Arab League, but now meeting President Trump. The Arab League, of course, having played a very important role as a convening power. This seems to have a very strong message for President Trump. All of the Arab and Western leaders will be praising President Trump for getting the ceasefire over the line, but they will also be talking to him about the way ahead, how to rebuild the Gaza Strip, how to keep that humanitarian aid flowing, how to put together a new administration to run the Gaza Strip. But let's focus on today, where we have been hearing more trucks are crossing the border. We can go to Deir al-Balah to speak in the central part of the Gaza Strip and speak to Chris McIntosh from Oxfam, the international charity. He's the charity's humanitarian response advisor. Chris McIntosh, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a long day. What kind of a day has it been for you? Are you seeing the signs that the shortages in the Gaza Strip are now at last beginning to be eased?
Well, Lise, I would like to say yes to that, but the simple answer and the truth is no, not yet. We're hoping that we're going to see it soon. According to the plan, there should be 600 trucks daily coming into the Gaza Strip to the tune of 4,200 a week. And that's going to be absolutely crucial in order to bring the prices down within the purchasing power of the average Gazan, which is what we've been waiting for a very, very long time. The problem is not that there isn't food here and that the market isn't stocked. The problem is that, first of all, there isn't nutritional value in that food, and secondly, it's not within reach of the average Gazan. So, yeah, it's a tentatively anticipatory atmosphere right now. People have been celebrating, but we haven't quite seen the results on the ground that we need to see.
When you look around you in Deir al-Balah, it's become a bit of a humanitarian hub after the destruction in southern Gaza Strip, particularly in Rafah. What for you is the main priority now?
The main priority is, first of all, that the ceasefire holds. Something worth mentioning is that this is only a ceasefire right now, and even if it matures into a peace, this land and its peoples know many different types of peace. So again, a lot remains to be seen. But then first and foremost is to end the famine-like conditions, bring food to those most critically in need, and then start preparing shelters and people for the winter time when the rains will come, the ground will get muddy, and people will be living in equally deplorable conditions, just very different to what they were living in the summertime.
And so many of the displaced time and again took refuge in Deir al-Balah, where there was, let us say, it wasn't completely immune from the attacks, but it hasn't borne the brunt of the Israeli military operations, which have left so much of Gaza in utter ruin. Have you been seeing in recent days many of the displaced moving away to return to, it's hard to say returning to their homes, returning to what's left of their homes?
Indeed. In fact, just today, moving around the area, I could see that there were spots that previously there were tents, and people have picked up and moved on, taking their chances to go back up north, as you say, to check the status of their houses. In many cases, they're not going to find anything but piles of rubble in the place. And right now, it's very much a logistical issue, as ceasefire conditions will allow. It's going to be a very logistically heavy process of moving that rubble so that people can actually access their former neighborhoods and start putting their lives back together to the degree that they're able to.
Chris, I just have to mention that while we're speaking, the images on the screen is former Prime Minister Tony Blair is now standing beside President Trump. As no doubt you know, President Trump has mentioned Tony Blair as being on the Board of Peace that he leads, wants him to play a crucial role. Of course, former Prime Minister Blair, who was also the head of the quartet, spent many years in the region. He's helped to work on the plans. And now Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, who was helped to the stage by President Macron of France. He was only invited in the very last hours of yesterday after a real outcry that why was there no senior Palestinian leadership at a summit to discuss the future of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And of course, many would want to hope the occupied West Bank as well. Chris, I know that your job is not a political one, but these names, Tony Blair, Mahmoud Abbas, they're going to play a critical role in putting together an economic plan for Gaza, a new leadership for Gaza. Are you hopeful at this moment, even as you say not even enough supplies are getting in, that there is a plan being put in place that can begin to formalize this rebuilding of Gaza, which is such a Herculean task?
Well, there's that word again, hope. And I'm a firm believer that we can't succumb to the dark forces of this world without it. So I definitely have hope. Who the names are going to be on that and who is going to sort of take credit for those activities, I don't know, but I sincerely hope that all of them are sincere in their efforts to make this a Palestinian-led effort and to give back to so many Gazans agency over their lives and some degree of self-determination to restore human dignity, which has been badly damaged, not only for the Palestinians, but for the entire world, as we've seen in the course of this genocide.
Yes, and you know well, I don't need to tell you just what a role the Palestinians themselves, educated Palestinians, Palestinian professionals who all the while they tried to protect their families, feed their families in the midst of mounting hunger, how they showed up for work every day. The Gaza Strip was said to have one of the highest per capita education of anywhere in the region. And those professionals, the people who know what has to be done, they must be telling you, we want to play a leading role. This is our land, our home, and we want to be able to play a crucial role in the future.
Without any doubt, and Gazans are proud, and they're very proud of the intellectuals that they have in their community. They have the resources to put things back together. They have the capacity to do it, and now it's time for them to have a say and the chief most say in what the next steps are going to be.
Chris McIntosh, we wish you well. It's good news that there is a promise and the first signs of those hundreds of trucks, 600 trucks a day that are meant to cross into the Gaza Strip with desperately needed food aid. You're waiting to see them. Palestinians are waiting to see them. And you have a huge task ahead of you, but at least the task is starting. Thank you very much for joining us from Deir al-Balah in the center of the Gaza Strip. These are the pictures. There's the slogan, Peace 2025. That's a very, very big statement to make. Many would say that there's no one's talking really of peace in this region, not in a real sense, but they are talking about a ceasefire. They are talking about the fact that 20 living Israeli hostages returned at last home today, that hundreds of Palestinian prisoners have also come home to be reunited with their families, and that there is a ceasefire at long last in the Gaza Strip. That is very, very good news, but there is a long and very rocky road to peace. Now there's the Qatar Prime Minister, the Emir of Qatar, standing next, and there's President Sisi on the other side. Leaders of the Arab and Islamic world, leaders from the West, Turkish president there as well, all come together in Sharm el-Sheikh to stand shoulder to shoulder with President Trump and to tell him they want him to remain engaged. He will tell them he needs their engagement too, most of all their resources. He's mentioned a few times on this trip that this is a group of the wealthiest, most powerful countries in the world, referring, of course, to the oil-rich, gas-rich states of the Persian Gulf, the Arab leaders who have said that they're ready. They're ready to put in the resources, but not if Israeli troops remain on the ground, not if there is any risk of the war resuming. Countries like Qatar, who had built so many hospitals and institutions in Gaza, have seen them all reduced to dust. They don't want it to happen again. This is a moment of cementing that first phase of the peace, of the deal, of the 20-point plan. There you go. The screen's gone to black. They've gone away from the cameras. We are expecting a signing ceremony. We've been broadcasting pictures of that empty hall with a wall of flags and a podium. We have had reports that this is what President Sisi and the other leaders there, they want this put on paper with signatures of saying that the deal is done. These are the guarantors. This is our commitment to make sure that this deal sticks. This is for the next day, the day after the war that President Trump has said repeatedly today is over. And the individual battles of so many families, the agony of the families of the Israeli hostages, but also of the nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees released today, even though many, as we've been reporting, were deported. They weren't allowed to spend time with their families, but they are out of prison. But let's just remind ourselves of some of the scenes that we saw today, scenes of overwhelming emotion and release of one family after another. These are the pictures of the moment when Eitan Moore met his family at the first reception point. This is a 25-year-old. This is screaming. He had been working as a security guard at the Nova Music Festival. The embrace that they had thought they would never see. His father said that Eitan Moore, he had saved dozens of people at the Nova Musical Festival, where the celebration turned into a slaughter before he too was kidnapped and dragged across the border by Hamas gunmen. Here's some of what he had to say on this day of all days.
I always boasted there about my parents and the good upbringing they gave me. Eliakim, of blessed memory, always told me that his father used to say to him, "Don't be right, be wise." Many times there, you had to be wise.
The hug of all hugs, families reunited. This is the moment that Matan Zangokar was reunited with his mother. 25-year-old had been taken with his partner, Ilana Grzegowski, from near Oz. Unbridled joy. The mother's love, the power of a mother's love. And she played an absolutely crucial role in the efforts of the families of the hostages to make sure the Israelis, the world, heard the stories of October the 7th, heard of their sorrow, their agony. Just look at those smiles. Home at last.
Huwag kang pangalan sa buhay. Serious sa buhay. Huwag kang pangalan. Mate. Long ka pangalan sa kanya.
And another story. There's been overwhelming joy, too, for the family of 22-year-old Matan Angrest. Let's look at those pictures as well, which his parents watched their son being handed over to the Israeli army officers from inside an army base, literally jumping with joy. The disbelief, the absolute disbelief that at long last the ordeal of their loved one is over, their agony is over. And family and friends were waiting for him at an Israeli hospital too, that when they saw that he was released from Hamas captivity. On October 7th, the IDF soldier had been in a tank that was attacked near the Gaza perimeter. He was hauled out of the tank, unconscious, and now he's returned. Well, there have been scenes of celebration and emotional reunions as well in the occupied West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. Sadly, we don't have those kind of personal scenes, but we hope to bring them to you. But this was the scene when the buses arrived, bringing hundreds of Palestinian prisoners and detainees. They began to return to their families and friends. Some of them had been in prison not just for years, but for decades, and their families had despaired of ever seeing their loved ones again. That is the bus of the International Committee of the Red Cross, an absolute crush of people. And Israel had warned them, don't celebrate, don't show your flags, wanting to suppress any kind of celebration. But there too, the emotions running over, mothers and wives, sisters, brothers embracing their loved ones. And their agony had been prolonged. And there was disappointment too, because until the last hours, the wrangling over the list of prisoners and detainees to be released, there was the swapping of some detainees for other detainees. So some families who'd been told they would at long last be reunited were told that wasn't going to be the case. The joy, the relief there as well. These are very, very human scenes as well. Israeli hostages, Palestinian prisoners and detainees who also suffered really, really harsh circumstances, incarcerated or in captivity. Two very, very human stories, stories of celebration today. Today is a moment, very, very an important diplomatic moment, a story of politics. But most of all, throughout the day, it has been a story of people on both sides. And throughout the day, we have had that split screen of Israelis celebrating the return of the last 20 hostages still alive who survived their ordeal. On the other side, the celebration in Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank, where all of the buses pulled out, and scenes too in Han Yunis, in southern Gaza Strip. Han Yunis shattered by Israeli military operations, street after street lying in utter ruin, and yet the people turned out to welcome home the detainees. Not all of the detainees, 1,400 who were detained by Israel throughout this war, have still not been released. And of course, thousands of Palestinian prisoners are still languishing in jail. But today was the start, a very, very important start, with many asking the question, as you've been hearing throughout our day of special coverage, where will this all lead? Well, before President Trump traveled to Sharm el-Sheikh for the signing we're expecting to see shortly of phase one of this deal between Israel and Hamas after indirect talks, he received a rapturous welcome from the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, where he declared in his very Trumpian way a new chapter of peace in the Middle East.
And after so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity.
President Trump, a few hours ago, speaking in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and from the beginning he has said that this ceasefire deal is not just about Gaza, it is about peace in the Middle East. And we've seen that huge banner at that hall where we're expecting to see the signing ceremony saying peace in the Middle East. And then for those photographs, one after another with the leaders, peace 2025. That's the superlatives that President Trump likes to use. It's not peace yet, but it certainly is the ambition. But it has been the ambition for many decades now, decades of breakthroughs and breakdowns in the Israeli-Palestinian peace processes, the Israeli-Arab processes as well. And a lot of those negotiations often took